Thank you guys for coming out tonight. My name is Michael Gorbach, software architect here at Raizlabs. My background is predominantly the Mac and iOS for many years now. And so my talk today is iOS I for the Android guy, or 3 reasons to try iOS. So I have been learning Android recently, which is why I'm up here. As I've been doing it, I've been fascinated by some of the differences that I found between the platforms. I really liked a lot about the Android ecosystem. I love the resource system. It's flexible, it's powerful, it's very consistent in the way it treats all these different kinds of resources. We have nothing like it on iOS. It's awesome. I love the framework that exposes more of your app's internal architecture to the OS so that things like widgets and loaders and content providers and implicit intents are all possible on Android. That said, there was a ton that I found missing on Android based on my experience from the iOS world. Sometimes it was just that there was a different way of doing it on Android and I just didn't know it yet, but sometimes it just wasn't there. I'm very glad that I came over to the other side, at least for a little bit, and did a bunch of Android work. I think it's made me a much better engineer. I think you should do the same thing. Come over to the other side and try iOS, even if just for a little bit. To motivate you to do so, this talk will give you 3 awesome parts of the iOS ecosystem that aren't available on the Android side. So there are a lot of great things about iOS. There are a million differences between these platforms, a million reasons to try the other side. I picked just a few to talk about here in the 5 minutes and less now that I have. And I tried to pick some things that were not just something you could add another library for, where you guys already have some very great third-party solutions, but things that are a little bit more central to the workflow of how we develop software. So what are we going to talk about today? First, we'll talk about our fancy new language on the iOS side called Swift. Second, we're going to talk about a powerful tool that we have on iOS for managing assets called asset catalogs. And third, we're going to talk about Apple's latest way of designing UI and UX for iOS called Storyboards. For a long time, we in the iOS world were in a similar situation to you guys with Android and Java. We had a language called Objective-C. It was perfectly usable, but it didn't really help us. We spent a lot of time fighting it. We worked around not having a lot of modern language features. But then Apple released Swift. This is Apple's language going forward. It's got all the modern features of a language like Kotlin. We hear about Kotlin. And it's got quite a bit more. It's explicitly designed for what's called value-oriented programming. And it's explicitly designed to help you share code in new ways using protocols. It is a purpose-built language just for developing apps, and it has predictable and incredibly fast performance. Most importantly, it is completely open source. It is supported not just by a large community of people now working on the language and the libraries, but also by Apple itself. This will be Apple's language for the next 20 years at least. If you invest in learning this language now, it's very likely that you're going to get to use it on the server, you're going to get to use it on Android, and you might even get to use it on your Linux box going forward. So the second thing I want to talk about is the way that iOS manages its assets. So this is the UI for what's called an asset catalog. At a basic level, an asset catalog is doing the same thing as the resource system does in Android. It organizes images. An asset catalog is just a folder hierarchy with images plus JSON description files. This UI does have a few tricks up its sleeve, though. First, during the build, the asset catalog system compiles all of these images into a single assets.car file, which is packaged in the app. This file is a special magic binary representation where the images are in perfect format just for the iOS graphics hardware, making the whole thing super fast. That means that you get a really easy to use implementation while you're working on your app, but a very fast implementation when your app's actually running. Second, you can see that this UI is very usable. This image in particular is an app icon, and it's showing me what all the different assets for it look like. And it's creating different slots so that we can put in the right sizes of images into the right places. We can see what devices expect what. This is much easier to use in my mind than navigating through the XML and folder hierarchies that Android uses. We've actually had designers go in and maintain this asset catalog for us so that developers don't have to do it. This is also, I think, a great example of what I mean When I say that, it's healthy to try the other side. Maybe this can give you an idea to create a UI like this for Android. Here's another awesome thing that the asset catalog system can do. This is a single vector asset that we're using for this icon with. It's actually a PDF. The problem is that mobile devices are too slow to render this PDF as a bitmap, and it wastes a lot of battery power to do so. The asset catalog system has a compile time step that takes these vector files and renders all the right sizes as bitmaps and puts them into the app package. This gives us basically the best of both worlds. One asset to deal with for designers and developers, and really great performance on the device. It turns out there is a solution for this on Android. It's just a third-party one. It's called Victor, and you can find it on GitHub. So there's a lot more that this UI can do. If you're building resizable images for something like a fancy button, you can do slicing right here in this UI, and the frameworks will automatically generate the image for you and make it resizable. Again, this is awesome because it's usable enough for designers to actually do themselves. So the last piece of the iOS ecosystem I wanted to give you a tour of today is called Storyboards. Here's an example of what a typical Android app might look like. This one is kind of old, right, judging by the tab activity, but you should get the idea. There are a lot of master detail relationships, a lot of transitions between one activity and another, and some containment relationships too, like the tabs in a tab view. So currently, all of this is defined in code. But what if you didn't have to keep all of that in your head all the time? iOS apps have a very similar structure. We've also got containers and lists, master detail relationships, and so on. But iOS has a tool called Storyboards to make it easy to visually see and design these relationships. Here's one example of a storyboard on iOS. Each screen here is its own view controller. In Android, you might call that something between an activity and a fragment. Each screen can be edited visually, including designing even the content of a particular list, like that list on the right that has a few specific items in it. The lines connecting the screens are called segues, and they specify the relationship between the screens. A relationship might be a programmatically initiated path from one screen to the next, like an intent to present a login screen when the user taps on a login button. You can design these here, but you can kick them off from code. A relationship might also be a containment relationship, where one larger screen has a set of tabs, each of which contains another screen. You can put as many screens on one canvas as you want, but sometimes in order to deal with the complexity of it, you want to link off to other canvases. That's what the arrows on the right, top right over there represent. I think storyboards are a great way to get the overall UI of your app up and running quickly, and a great way of seeing how the parts of your app interact with each other. We've actually been fantasizing about getting our designers to own these storyboards too, so that we have even less work we have to do. So wouldn't it be great if Android had a way of seeing all of your activities and the relationships between them in one place? So iOS has a kick-ass new language. It has some great tools for dealing with assets, and it has a powerful designer to put together and see the high-level navigation for your entire app. That's just 3 of the interesting things that are available for you to play with in the iOS ecosystem. There's a whole lot more where that came from. What I wanted to leave you with tonight is this. Go and try iOS. Go and try other platforms. There's always a new perspective to learn. There's always a new way to solve a problem that you deal with every single day. Some of it is going to transfer, or maybe it'll help you create tools for Android that don't even exist yet. Regardless, you're going to become a better Android engineer and a better engineer overall. I promise you won't regret it. Thank you.